Hello and welcome to the AFC Newsday podcast. Today I'm joined by a special guest. Unfortunately, Dan can't make it, but should be a fun episode nonetheless. Talking about PSV last night, Arsenal's first Champions League game in however many years, I want to say about 7. It's been a bit of a tipsy-turvy ride, but we're finally back in and things are looking really good for the club. And we started it off with a really good performance. But before we get into any of that, I'm joined by a special guest, AFC Carys. How's it going, my friend?
Hello, it's good to be here and thanks for inviting me, Matt. So, yeah, should be a good discussion.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, it's actually Carys, not Carys, sorry. Instantly messed that one up. But anyways, we start as it means to go on PSV last night. Lovely 4-0 performance, starting off at the Emirates. The Emirates hasn't heard that music for a good while, so it's fantastic to be back and it's fantastic to hear that. Carys, what did you make of the performance?
No, I think for sure, I think everyone can agree that watch the game, which I'm pretty sure every Arsenal fan did. I think that was our best performance this season so far. And I think it showed a lot of the things that we had been lacking at the beginning of the season and that we've been a lot more clinical in front of goal. And I think that's just something that we needed to show ahead of the North London derby. So that was a really, really, really encouraging performance.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you mentioned us being clinical. I mean, some of the goals we scored at the time, I was kind of like, okay, they're lovely goals, but took them a bit for granted. I saw them back. I was like, the Trossard finish is incredible. The Odegaard finish is just, it's vintage Martin Odegaard, really. The Jesus finish was such a powerful hit. And of course, Bukayo on act for a keeper parry from the initial Odegaard shot. And we just had a fun evening, I feel like. I think I've not felt that little stress watching an Arsenal game in I don't know how long. And I think it just felt like we were back at the start of the season last year where there wasn't so much pressure. Things were enjoyable. We were free flowing, smashing teams left, right, and centre. Teams weren't, treating us like a top team per se. Now, you have it so teams park the middle of it completely, very compact, stop Saka getting any kind of one-on-one or two-on-one. Obviously, Odegaard doesn't get much space, but against PSV, it just felt like we had all the space in the world. And Odegaard, I mean, how good was he?
No, he was amazing. Like, I feel like he's just added like so many dimensions to his game, seasons upon seasons. Like, I remember when he first came, I was like, I don't want this guy here. That this guy is not. He's a bit timid, let's say, in front of goal. I'm not really sure if he'll offer us what we need. Then every season he's just proven us wrong again and again and again, and he's pretty much become basically our talisman. Not just forget our captain. He's pretty much been like the one that's been driving us forward. And he might not be the loudest personality per se, but like on the pitch he does the talking, and he's been fantastic. Like one of the best goal scoring midfielders in Europe. In fact, one of the best players in the world right now, 100%.
Couldn't agree more. And I mean, the way even he was just playing when all the other big hitters were off, obviously we've got such a top team, but when, Gabby Jesus came off, when Bukayo Saka came off, which was great for him to get the rest and great for our players to have that rest ahead of the North London derby, which we'll preview shortly. It was just brilliant to see the crispness of his passing, how he dictates the game, obviously the goal he scored. He just plays the game how he wants to play the game. And I think one thing as well, which is really underrated about Odegaard, is his availability now. And that's not to speak too soon, but when he came to the club, I remember he had, I think it was knee problems, I want to say. I think it was knee problems. It might have, it
Yeah, I
was
think it was
cupping.
me and just a few other random issues. But the thing I want to also add as well is that I've been seeing a lot of like conversation about it on Twitter recently. And no offense, but I think some people on Twitter tend to try and become more tactical than they actually are. And people are
Couldn't
saying
agree
that,
more.
Erdegaard hasn't got balance in this game, and it's probably the most nonsense I've seen, like on the apps, like in recent memory. Like, I saw some, those little like spider diagrams or those maps that shows you like the passing networks and stuff. It was showing, for example, that Erdegaard was pretty much one of the main players that was dictating a lot of our passing movements. And just because of they're not seeing as many key passes on the stat sheet, they're like, oh, there's no balance in this game, this, that. Like, you just have to watch our games. Like, you can really see that he's everywhere for us, whether it's deep, interchanging with Rice. Maybe, of course, the dynamic of Saka is not as fluid as it's been in the past season, but I think it's more because the teams are alert to what they can do together. But like yesterday, you could see all of the good bits about Odegaard's game, and then obviously the goal was well taken, very well, just right in the bottom corner as he always does. So no, he was fantastic yesterday. He was fantastic.
Really, and it's just brilliant to see. As you say, when he first came, there was question marks around. I mean, there was question marks around pretty much everyone we signed that summer. Obviously, Aaron Ramsdale being the notable one, who we'll get onto shortly as well. But he was brilliant. And just away from him, who else really impressed you last night?
There was many. Like, if you go from back to front, I think David Raya was fantastic, but we'll get to that in more detail later, which I think we should leave that. Who else can I say was fantastic? William Saliba was brilliant. I think there was one moment where the ball was played through and it was him versus Luke de Jong, and he just decides to do some little like flip flap or something. He's so calm under pressure. Like, one of the best central defenders in Europe right now. 100%. Then Zinchenko has been very like underrated, and I can speak for myself. I've not underrated him at points as well. Like, you can just see how much more fluid we look when he's in the side. Gabriel, too, passing game, had like, it wasn't like the peak of his game, but he had like a very solid game at the back, and that's what you want, at least a 7 out of 10, I guess. And then it was fantastic. Like, he was really up for the occasion. I feel like a lot of the players played well also because PSV weren't really like sitting back compared to most Premier League teams have. And I saw a stat that even said that when we beat PSV, that was like their first like 26 games, something like that, which is mental to think about. So PSV will come into this game with a lot of confidence, like, thinking that, okay, we have a chance against these guys, like we can cause them problems. And they had a few times where they like made inroads with Lang, but they didn't really like have any shots on it. But I thought that just overall most of the team was good, but I think the main star for us was definitely Odegaard. So I think the man of the match was deserved. And obviously Jesus as well. Why didn't I mention him? Jesus was fantastic as well. He was really good.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, really. I mean, I thought I'd just give a bit of a, not disclaimer per se, but I think my internet's been a bit shaky per se. So at times I was just making sure that the lag wasn't translating to the stream, because on my side you're a tiny bit laggy at times, but I was just checking and it seemed completely fine.
Yeah, hopefully it's not me either as well, but yeah.
Yeah, but if there is any technical difficulties, guys, sorry about that. Or anyone watching right now, appreciate it. And hope you're enjoying the stream.
Oh yeah, sorry, and Kai Havertz as well.
Yeah, Kai's a good one to talk about. I mean, we spoke about him quite a lot with, obviously Dan and other guests recently on this podcast. And there's been a lot of discourse on Arsenal Twitter, Arsenal social media, Arsenal fans. And I think the more I think about it, the more I think if you put his performances in another player's shoe, a lot of the time players' performances will go almost unnoticed if they're a player which people like a lot and that's just a regular, or a player who someone just doesn't like, and then if they don't do something incredible, then they don't get rated heavily. And I think Havertz last night was really, really good. And obviously there's been a lot of criticism on his name, but I thought when he went to number 9, he was really, really good. He was good, in the physical duels. His ball retention was very good. There was one moment when he was playing as a 9, when he got the ball, kept it for a few touches and then played it back. And that's what you need when you're 3-0 up. And I like the fact he can play as a 9 as well. I think he looked a lot more comfortable there too. I don't know what you think with that. And I think that makes a lot of sense with obviously him playing as a 9 for Chelsea. But, it's clear that it's an adaptation. It's clear that it's going to take time. And obviously Chelsea's a whole new environment in itself for, Chelsea to Arsenal. That's massive for Kai Havertz. So environmentally wise, the way obviously Chelsea have been in recent years. But mentioning obviously Fabio Vieira as well. I think one thing which really just struck me when he came on again was just the way he just kicks the ball. Like simply said, but it's such sharp, precise passing. And all the subs, to be fair, last night, I think Arteta got it spot on. What do you think?
No, I think I want to talk about Kai as well first. And like anyone that's probably followed me on Twitter knows that I'm not particularly the biggest fan of Kai Havertz, but I feel like it's always like good to say it as you see it. And I feel like the way Kai played, I feel like he played quite well, to be honest. Like I feel like he was holding it up well. Whenever Raya was booting it up into Kai Havertz, because if he's got that physical stature, he could kind of like head it or knock it off to a player that's next to him. And I feel like it's not even a case of Havertz has to play as a 9 to really succeed. Like I feel like the best place for him to succeed is really I feel like a lot of his best form is when he's like playing in the right half spaces, or if he's like, able to drive from the right rather than drive from the left. Like I don't know, there's people that can explain it better than me, to be honest. But I remember some opportunities where I think the ball was booted and he was like kind of carrying it down or holding it down the right wing, that sort of area, and he managed to lay it off well for somebody else. Um, he's not like the best on the half turn, and to be honest, I like players that are more slick on the half turn, to be honest. But you can see his qualities that he brings in terms of like defensive intensity, um, in terms of like arriving late and stuff. I feel like he's just waiting for that final action to click, because if he could have gotten an assist yesterday for Jesus, which didn't come off unfortunately, and yeah, as much as I probably have other players that I prefer, I do feel like Havertz showed himself well, so he should be happy. And then Fabio Vieira as well. I feel like we've just seen a new player this season, and to be honest, people will use Vieira as an example of, okay, if we have patience with Vieira, why not have it for Kai Havertz? Like for me personally, it's a case that we paid like 60 plus million for Kai Havertz, so of course you want to see a little bit more from him. But in terms of Fabio Vieira, like he's added like running in behind into his game a little bit. I think there was one moment that stood out for me where I think the ball came into his space and he kind of like chopped it back and made space like really quickly. Like he sorts his feet
Yeah.
out so quickly now. There's just a lot more intensity and swagger to his game now. And for me personally, we'll get onto it later, I feel like he has to start the North London derby. I think he's been that good.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's interesting as well because obviously there's been a lot of talk about Saka depth, and rightly so. But I think Vieira is also becoming a lot better in that right wing. Although he's obviously played in the middle so far in the Premier League, he came on that right wing. I thought he was very good against Monaco. I think his skill set is so good. His technical security is really good. His ball striking is unbelievable. He's got a very creative, mindset as a player. He's such an exciting player, and as you say, he does just look completely different. And I think not to compare, Arsenal to City or anything, but it feels like there's a bit of a common occurrence, if you will, with players who join City or Arsenal or join these, very tactical systems and take a while to adapt because it's a big move. And I think it's pretty normal for players to take time to adapt. And that's just how it seems to be with Fabio Vieira. Obviously, with Martin Odegaard and a few others too, although that was in a different year when the club wasn't in the same position it was. But I'd like to just touch on Gabriel Jesus as well. How good was he last night?
Oh, he was fantastic. Like you can it's no disrespect to, let's say, someone like Nketiah. Like I feel like whenever he's come in, he's really taken his chances and he's really shown what he can do, and he's shown himself to be a good outlet. And I think that is something that we will need. Let's say whether it's in January or the summer, but we'll get to that another time. But just the fact that he operates so well outside the box, the way he links up with certain players, the way that he can just wriggle out of tight spaces so easily. Like he's just a footballer in the sense that he's the type of footballer that when you think like what is football, like what do you enjoy about football, what gets you out, you sort of you pay, as much as his missed chances can really infuriate me sometimes. Um, like he's just such a skillful player and just such a joyful player to watch. And yeah, he was just fantastic, man. Honestly, like well worth it. And his goal
Yeah.
was fantastic too as well. I should have said, yeah.
Oh, that was a gorgeous finish. I think not uncharacteristic of Gabby Jesus, but I think seeing him strike the ball with that power, with that aggression from there is brilliant. And at the same time, as you say, him on the ball is just unbelievable. And it's a matter of time before he makes one of those phenomenal solo runs, a goal that Palace won, the Bournemouth won. One of them will happen for sure. And I can't wait for when it does because he's such a top player. He really is. And I think what impresses me the most with Gabriel Jesus is the way he just manhandles tall defenders, really, to be honest. You've got, 6'2", 6'3", 6'4" players. He just manages
Someone
to
of
get the
his
best
size,
from
he's
areas.
just amazing.
Reminds me of Sanchez in a sense.
Mm. Obviously, like
But
better on the ball, but like no disrespect to Sanchez, of course, but actually no all disrespect after the way he left. But anyways, nah, like Jesus, he's just brilliant for his stature on the ball. I remember someone making some joke tweets saying that if Jesus could finish, he'd be up for Ballon d'Or debates.
okay, not that I don't disagree, right? But sorry, not that I agree, right? But
Yeah.
I genuinely think he is that good that availability, so long as, those injuries don't come back to get him, the guy is just like you name anything in his game and it's pretty much just a strong point. Like his playmaking side's very good. His ball striking, obviously, as we've said, can always be improved. But his dribbling, his passing, is just on the ball work, off the ball work, his movement. He's just an absolute delight to watch. And I think what I loved as well last night was that moment which led to, I think it was the Trossard goal, where
He made
it
some
was a good.
crazy touches in it, I think.
Yeah, it was a good. Oh yeah, there was one from the goal kick as well where he
Yeah.
just took a ridiculous touch. But there was one where it was a good pass. Sorry, it was it was passed to him, but not perfectly, and he just took it in his stride completely, and then played it to Bukayo, and Bukayo played it to Trossard, and it was just such a good touch. And talking of Trossard, I think he'll be the final player we touch on from this game. Really, I mean, all the players were fantastic. Obviously, a few notable shout outs. Bukayo Saka getting his first goal in the Champions League is just so tailor made, really. Martin Odegaard scoring a power driver. Just can't ask for more, really. Got to rotate a lot. But yeah, obviously, as I say, Bukayo, just so good for him, isn't it, really? He just keeps hitting new strengths.
No, Bukayo has been fantastic for a season upon season, and can finally put to bed all these stupid ideas of he's not world, he's not elite until he scores against Union Berlin in Champions League, or he's not world class until he scores against PSV. Well, now he scored, so let's see how they move the goalposts even more, I guess. But
It'll just be like, oh, it's not a top team. And then it'll be like, oh, but he only scored against this team and they're not playing very well. It'll be like, oh, it's not a semi-final. Oh, it's not a final. Like, what? That's just how social media is
yeah, it'll
nowadays. So.
keep happening. We know that for sure.
But
But
final player I did want to touch on as well was Leandro Trossard. I mean, I've personally been critical of him off the left. I personally think Reece Nelson, who also came on and was really good, and it was great to see him out as well. Come on, there's so many talking points, but would like to move on to the Spurs game very shortly. But I thought Leo, he was really, really good, wasn't he?
no, he was fantastic. I think for a while, like on my account, that I feel like Trossard is the best finisher at the club. Like for me, he's not even like debatable personally. And as much as we got loads of good finishers, for me, he's the best one. Just left foot, right foot, whether it's with power into the roof of the net, in the corners. Like if you just look at his goal catalogue from just joining Arsenal alone, he scored such a variety of goals that it's just mental. Like the Everton one, the way he kind of like sliced off the ball, like just so quickly. Even this one as well, just bang in the bottom corner, just first time. Like he's such a brilliant finisher to watch, and I think the best thing about him is that he's just so well-rounded in many aspects that the only one that you could say that is a weakness for him, and it's not even like that big of a weakness, is more about his playing style, is that he's not someone that you often see like running in behind, I guess.
Yeah,
But
that's very
other
true.
than that, he's like an Arsenal player that can see that could survive across generations, in the sense that, you know, he could play under a Wenger team, he could play under just any sort of style, like across the front line, even as a number 8. It just tells you a lot about how good this guy is. Honestly, he's just an incredibly well-rounded technical footballer, and it's just, I'm just so glad that we got him just because of Chelsea, basically. But yeah.
It's times like this though where you're like, the squad Arsenal have is just unbelievable. I mean, you look at even the players who didn't come on or didn't feature last night. Obviously, Aaron Ramsdale, we'll talk about shortly. Jakub Kiwior, you know, the Polish defender, signed last January. You've got
Nketiah
Mohamed
didn't
El
come on.
Neni, who's just come back from injury. Eddie Nketiah, huge one who's played a lot this season, didn't come on. And it just, for me, kind of puts into perspective of, granted, you know, we probably won't have all these names fit at all times, but that's still with Martinelli out, supposedly not for too long. Hopefully that's the case. Yuri and Timber out for however much longer, which is gutting, obviously, and Thomas Partey out as well. So it just puts into perspective how deep Arsenal's squad is, and it's kind of why I wanted to hold back a bit on the signing front. I think if we got another defender, I wouldn't have complained, and I would have been happy, and it would have put me in a far better, you know, it puts you in a safety mindset that if Zinchenko goes down or Tomiyasu goes down or anyone like that, then you just feel a lot safer. But at the same time, I feel like it's so hard because you can't really give assurances to any type of new signing we made, because they can't even make the bench at the minute, which is just testament to how deep the squad is.
I feel
But
like on Twitter, especially, like people catastrophize a lot, and I feel like when it comes to Spurs, first you've got to think if it adds another quality player to the squad, because Arteta talks about having 2 players in every position that can compete with each other. That, you know, what will they add to this team that either we don't currently have, or do they add to this team that if there's a quality drop when one player drops out? And adding another defender would have been for numbers' sake rather than quality sake, if that makes sense. So
yeah,
I feel like
100%.
the best thing would have been is just to like let our situation be as it is, and then wait until January and reevaluate from there. That's always the best thing to do, which is how the January transfer.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think moving away from the PSV game onto the goalkeeper debate, really, to be fair, I think going more into the lines of the North London derby. But I'd like to just ask you, what do you think of the comments made by Mikel Arteta, where he said something along the lines of he wished that he'd experimented with keepers earlier, and he's almost, you know, saying that he'd like to be rotating keepers. Do you think that's something which you actually do? Do you think that's something which could happen? And how do you see it working out with obviously David Reyes starting last night against Everton and most likely the North London derby, which we'll get into shortly?
So the thing is, as I say this, you never know if I can be wrong on this, because obviously I'm not the manager, you're not the manager, none of us are. But I feel like people are taking Arteta's comments too literally, to the point that they think that we're genuinely going to rotate goalkeepers. Because as much as Arteta can go into press conferences and be like, "Oh, you know, my biggest regret, I didn't sub out a keeper or have the courage to do this." Okay, cool, that in that moment of time. But I think any team in, like, let's say, penalty shootout, let's say, that genuinely thinks about rotating goalkeepers like as a viable option, because he's not going to come out to press and be like, "Oh, I have this and that one. This one's going to be my new number one because of this, and that." Because obviously it will hurt their confidence if they hear that, "Oh, my manager has talked about me in public that, oh, I'm not the number one no more." But I feel like actions and what our eyes are seeing, they speak louder than words. And for me, at least, it's very clear that David Raya is our new number one, personally.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, obviously, I think he's almost been, or it's feeling like that he's potentially doing what he did to Leno, which is an interesting one because I personally think Ramsdale's been brilliant over the course of his time at Arsenal so far. And obviously, when he first joined, there was a lot of animosity, shall we say, towards the
Yeah.
signing. But I think it's fair to say he's proved a lot of people wrong. And I also do almost feel like it's a case where had we not signed David Raya, I don't think there'd really be a debate about Aaron Ramsdale's future. Obviously, you have a certain portion of Twitter or certain portion of fans who would like, someone like a Mike Maillard to come in. But largely speaking, I think most people have been very happy with Aaron Ramsdale. I mean, the Liverpool save at the end, the Tottenham game was huge. His distribution's been fantastic. But I think with a potential different, change in approach and the back end of last season, obviously the Southampton mistake and a few others, which I don't really like nitpicking because, players are going to make mistakes. They're young. He's still so young for his age. I think he's 25, which is so young for a keeper.
Yeah.
But it's, mistakes are going to happen. But it does very much feel like Raya brings that calmness, which I'd say Ramsdale first had, and it's not that he's lost that per se. I just think Raya is so composed on the ball, and as you say, you kind of just read the room almost, and it does feel like that David Raya will be the Arsenal. I mean, like even with rotation, which I feel like Arteta probably still does want to do, but as you say, Arteta says a lot of things, and a lot of it isn't exactly to be taken too literally. But it does feel like David Raya will be the number one. And what have you made of David Raya in an Arsenal shirt so far?
So I'll start by saying that in terms of Aaron Ramsdale, I've been like a very big fan of Ramsdale for most of the time at Arsenal, but I think what David Raya has brought that again, this is only 2 games we're talking about, so I can also bring in some stuff about how he was at Brentford. What he's brought that Aaron Ramsdale hasn't particularly, I'd say, is that he's a lot more consistent when it comes to finding his teammates with long balls. That's number one. I feel like Ramsdale was very consistent with that when he first joined Arsenal. And it was something that we were all like, wow, this is crazy that he's finding players with this. Like, how did we know that he was this good at Sheffield or whatever, or Bournemouth? Um, but I feel like it's just something that's been in Raya's game ever since he was a Brentford player as well. So one, he's very good when it comes to long balls, and number two, which I think he offers over Ramsdale, is that he is a lot better when it comes to high claims. So whenever a cross comes into the box, I don't really fear as much compared to how I used to with Ramsdale, who, while I do like him a lot, I feel like at times he can have his moments where he'll flap at the ball or just like, punch it out rather than, gather it. And it's funny because I think Raya is even shorter than Ramsdale, funnily enough. So I feel like, as we were just saying earlier, Raya just transmits that calmness that I don't think Ramsdale fully does, I guess. Like Ramsdale's a very brave goalkeeper, let's say, but in terms of calmness, I think it's just from watching them, you can just see that Raya has that, and I don't think it's something that Ramsdale really has, and it's nothing that I hold against him as a keeper. But yeah, I think those are the two things that Raya has over him. And another thing I would also add is that what was I going to say? One thing that we see between because from what Shire at Brentford, I think if there was one thing that was a bit of a weakness with him was that he could sometimes flap at some shots, like some long shots, especially where you feel like, yeah, you could save that. But recently, Ramsdale's been having a bit of that issue as well. He can make some really good saves, don't get me wrong, but he'll have some times where he'll flap at some shots where you think, no, you really should be getting a stronger hand to that. So um, I feel like the goalkeeper situation is still all to be played for, but I feel like at least in terms of the hierarchy, um, Raya is just about above. If Ramsdale came in for this PSV game, I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now. But the fact that he played 2 games in a row, I don't really see. You never know because Arteta's a maverick at times, but I don't really see Raya being dropped.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it's probably more the question of, will rotation be implemented with the keepers? How will rotation be implemented with the keepers? And, it seems like Raya will be the number one long term. So I feel like that's probably the main question answered. Although obviously still give it a bit of time, see how things materialise. Although, as you said, you kind of read the room, you get the feeling that it will be David Raya as that starter long term for Arsenal. But I'm more intrigued about how. By the way, I thought I'd just give a quick disclaimer. The weather here has been absolutely shocking. It started raining, so if you do hear any rain or technical difficulties or anything like that, then sorry about that. That's just not much to do about it. But last night particularly was shocking weather-wise. But anyways, that's off topic. back onto the David Raya Ramsdale stuff. I think it's more to the point of there was links instantly with Chelsea and Bayern. I think that's agent stuff for his side, which I was a bit confused by. But it will be interesting to see how Ramsdale and Raya are rotated long term, as we've pretty much gathered that it will be, David Raya, and we will move on to the Tottenham game now. I don't think there's too many dilemmas about the lineup. We'll go on to Fabio Vieira slightly again, although we've already, sung his praises, and rightly so. And it does very much feel like he'll get the start at the derby, and he very much deserves it. The back four or back five is pretty much not really a question anymore. Well, I'd be very surprised if Arteta was to bring Ramsdale in now for the North London derby. It would be more so the game against Brentford in the Cup when you'd more expect that. But you never know with Mikel. So there's that. But yeah, back five more or less. Are you in agreement that will be unchanged pretty much from Wednesday night?
Yeah, I feel like the back five will be pretty much the same as we've seen, and I think it makes perfect sense to have that stability going into such a massive derby game as well.
Yeah, completely agree. And midfield side of things, once again, it just picks itself. You've got Declan Rice and you've got Martin Odegaard, who are not getting dropped for anything. And then you've got either Kai Havertz or Fabio Vieira, it feels at the minute. And obviously, Havertz started the first few league games, the one against United, the one against Palace, the one against Fulham and Forest, I want to say. But Vieira, came on against Fulham, started against Everton, which was quite ironic because we were actually speaking about on the last episode that, it's maybe not the type of game you chuck Fabio Vieira in. But as we've kind of learnt with Arteta, whatever says goes really. Like he'll, find a
Exactly.
way to make it work. I go back to that St James's Park when we went to St James's Park and played a midfield three of Xhaka, Jorginho, and Martin Odegaard, and that's one of the most powerful, places you can go in terms of the midfield battle, and we completely won it and deservedly so. So there's that. But I'll let you, if you want to add anything else on Fabio Vieira and why you think he should start ahead of Kai.
No, I feel like personally, whether we played the PSV game or not, I feel like Fabio Vieira earned his start for the North London derby from the last few cameos he made, and especially the Everton game for me sealed it. Like, for me personally, if you can withstand the physical battle against Everton, you can withstand the battle against anybody. And the thing is that we've seen from all of these games that he's got such an excellent final ball. Like, wonderful. Every time, even for against Everton, the ball he played to Martinelli for the disallowed goal, inch perfect. Against Fulham, in this cameo, the ball he played into Nketiah, which for me personally, if you look at that again, it's harder than it looks to play that ball and just, curve it around. It was almost like a score hero type assist.
Yeah, it's one of those you screenshot, you're like, oh, just put it there, and never happens, but he made that reality.
Yeah, so like just the fact that he's got that final ball on lock, we know that. I think the main thing that people are asking was, can he hack the physical side of the game? And the way he was playing against Everton, against the midfield with Doucouré, Gay and Onana, the way he was holding his own, for me, he has to start North London derby, 100%. Because I feel like what he's given, which is what Havertz has been lacking a bit, let's say. And don't get me wrong, he showed a lot more final products, let's say, against PSV, but I feel like Vieira has been showing it a bit more consistently, let's say. So, and the fact that Vieira is showing that he can also make runs off the ball and show intensity, I feel like we start Vieira for that derby. But that's very much a knife edge sort of debate at the moment.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And obviously, you mentioned a few of the moments. That ball in against Everton very easily. Just had it been attacked, that would have been an assist on his name as well. So he's been really, really impressive. And his defensive work as well hasn't been a weakness. Obviously, as you say, if you can play at Goodison Park and do well, then you can do it anywhere. So that's really pleasing. And I think that's more or less it for the team side of things, because Trossard starts definitely, Gabby Jesus starts definitely, although I love Eddie Nketiah and I'm so happy with, how he's developed here. But Jesus is just, for me, one of the very best in the world in his position. And, you got a level raiser, the profile he has, the skill set he has, the goals he manages to accumulate as well. I mean, I don't need to say any more. Obviously, we've sung his praises already. And then obviously Bukayo Saka speaks for himself. But how are you actually feeling ahead of the actual Tottenham game?
I'm very confident, to be honest, like very confident. Yeah. Like, I feel like, if I'm being completely honest, I feel like Tottenham have been getting a bit too much gas for my liking. And don't get me wrong, they've started like unbelievably well under Postecoglou, but I feel like they have got vulnerabilities defensively. And we've seen that in quite a few games. But one game where you saw a lot of their defensive vulnerabilities was against Man United, where despite the fact they won, they were so open at the back. And I just feel like, credit to their manager, I guess. I don't like giving credit to them anyway, but he set them up in a way that they're very brave going forwards. Like, they do a lot of things conventionally. Like, you got Maddison in the 10, you've got guys like Udogi overlapping, even like Mana Solomon playing like as a typical winger, as you'd expect. Heung-min Son has found a bit of form as a striker, I guess, in recent times. Even like one player that we have to make sure that we stop in the North London derby, or two players, I'd say, would be Basuma and Maddison. If we stop both of them building up, I feel like that would be the key to us winning North London derby for sure.
I was gonna go on to, actually. I think the final thing we'll touch on is the actual player battles. But before we do go into that, obviously Derby at home, as you say, pretty confident. I do agree that Spurs have got a bit too much, gas, if you will. But I think what's important for them more than the gas or more than anything else is that for them, they're doing really well. They've made the right appointment. They're signing the right players. They've got a really nice balance about them, a really good midfield. Sar's looked really impressive so far. Basuma's looked fantastic, and so has James Maddison. And they've just made some very astute signings. Obviously, Dennis Udogie last summer was signed from, I want to say, Udinese, and went back on loan there and was really good. Has been really good so far this season as well. But I also, at the same time, I see the Brentford game they played and I see the United game they played, and I feel early on, particularly, they do take a bit of time to adjust and a bit of time to find their feet. And I think that's almost the time where, in a game like the Derby, although we've not scored many goals early on this season, PSV was actually our first one. I think if they don't start too quick, obviously it's a Derby, so form goes slightly out the window, but they need to start very quick from the off, but not just quick. If they play into our hands, which is, trying to play expressive or the way which they've been doing so far, then I'd very much expect that to benefit us. I don't think any team can really out football us, bar Man City. So there's that. But Carys, what do you think of the individual battles, or where do you think the game is won and lost? Obviously, you said Maddison and Basuma. Are those like the main guys for you?
Yeah, I'd say so. I feel like Basuma's found a new lease of life for them under their new manager, just in terms of, they've got a more forward-thinking manager that allows them to build and go forward. And Basuma has really like been expressive and very just, yeah, he's been fantastic for them. And James Maddison as well, the Premier League Player of the Month recently. He's been brilliant just in terms of just every aspect of the game, to be honest with you. Like, I've been a fan of Maddison for a long time, so I'm not surprised that he's been doing well for them. Romero as well, to be fair to him, at least in recent times, he's been doing pretty well for them. And I feel like possibly their best player this season, I'd say, if it's not Madison, it's probably Udogi. Like, we've got to be careful with not letting him have too much license to roam down his wing for sure. So I feel like those have been the main players that have been good for them. But saying that, like, I'm not particularly scared of them as a unit. Like, as a defensive unit, we'll get loads of chances. I feel like it'll be very similar to the PSV game we just had now, where we'll have loads of chances to get forward. But at the very same time, even Erdegaard made some post-match comments, which this just tells you about his mentality. I wish I had the quote in front of me; would have made it easier. But he was saying there was a few things that even we could have improved on in terms of like defensively. Whilst we were very good in terms of not letting PSV get that many chances, they had the odd moment down Lang's wing where they were getting past Ben White now and then and having a few like opportunities, but it didn't really amount to anything much. I guess it's just been a little bit nitpicky, to be honest, but I feel quite positive because I feel like we're going to have the same amount of space that we've had in the PSV game. But we've got to be wary because I think in terms of number of shots attempted in the league, I think if I remember correctly, Spurs are like top 2 for shots attempted in the league this season, which just tells you how expressive these guys are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a bit of a funny one as well. Will probably be the second time we face Brennan Johnson in a matter of weeks after his move on deadline day to Spurs. And I think he's a quality player, but it's just a different threat to have to be aware of, really. But I think we'll just close it out then on the score predictions.
3-1.
3-1, 3-1. I'm going to go a bit rogue, but I'm going to say 5-2. Just feel like it's going to be a bit of a high scoring, crazy game. Whenever I say that, it'll probably be a 1-0 or a 2-0 because that's just how it is, isn't it? But I'm going for a 5-2, bit rogue. But yeah, Carys, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to have you on and down to get you on the future 100%.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been brilliant. And yeah, looking forward to when we get our win for sure.
Yeah, hopefully, I mean, at the time you're listening to this, probably the same day or whenever, but hopefully on Sunday we continue off PSV with another big win. Well, big win is any scoreline against Tottenham, obviously, at the derby. And at the Emirates, a ground which we've been so good at against Spurs in recent years. But we broke the duck last year, so obviously at their ground, so we don't want to have anything unforgivable like that happening the other way. But anyways, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a great rest of your days and take care. We'll see you next time.
Yep, peace.